After my husband passed away, my son said, "We want the apartments, the company, everything." My lawyer implored me to fight. I said, "Give it all to them." Everyone thought I had gone crazy. At the final hearing, I signed the papers. My son smiled until their lawyer turned pale upon reading a sentence that changed everything. That sentence left them frozen. Let me tell you how we got there, because you need to understand what really happened. My name is Francine. I am 64 years old, and I have just buried the love of my life. Luther died 3 months ago. 40 years of marriage erased in a second. A massive heart attack while he was reviewing documents in his office. There were no goodbyes, no last words, just the sound of the telephone at 2 in the afternoon and a voice telling me that my world had ended. Luther was everything to me. We built an empire together from zero. He started with a small auto parts shop. I kept the books in a worn-out notebook, attended to customers, and cleaned the floors. We slept 4 hours a night and ate coffee and toast to save money, but we had dreams, we had love, and we had hope. 35 years later, Luther owned an automotive distribution chain valued at $12 million. We had 3 apartment buildings in the city, a house on the coast, and bank accounts I never imagined possible. But the money never changed us. We were still Luther and Francine, the same two who started with nothing. We had 2 sons, Jerome and Vernon. I loved them from the moment they were born. I gave them everything. Luther worked tirelessly so they could have what we never did: private schools, universities abroad. Vernon studied business administration here in the States. Jerome got his law degree in Europe. They returned as professionals, successful, wearing expensive suits and watches that cost more than our first car. I thought they would be proud of their parents. I thought they would value the sacrifice. I was completely wrong. Luther's funeral was a rainy Tuesday in October. I wore a black dress he had given me 3 years prior. My hands trembled so much I could barely stand. The casket was covered in white flowers. I just wanted to die with him. 40 years together aren't forgotten in a day. They are never forgotten. Jerome and Vernon were by my side during the ceremony. Vernon held my arm when I almost fainted in front of the grave. Jerome brought me water when I couldn't breathe from crying. I thought that pain would unite us. I thought the death of their father would bring us closer. How naive I was. Not even 48 hours had passed after the burial when Jerome showed up at my house. It was Thursday afternoon. I still couldn't sleep in my bed because it smelled like Luther. I was sleeping on the living room sofa, hugging one of his shirts. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. I could barely think clearly. Jerome rang the doorbell 3 times. When I opened the door, he walked in without greeting me. Vernon was right behind him. Both wore dark suits. Both had serious expressions. Neither asked me how I was. Neither hugged me. "Mom, we need to talk," Jerome said. His voice was cold, calculating, as if he were in a business meeting and not facing his mother who had just become a widow. I sat on the sofa. They remained standing as if they were judges, and I was the accused. Vernon crossed his arms. Jerome pulled a folder from his briefcase, a folder full of papers I didn't understand at that moment, but which would change everything. "Dad died without an updated will," Jerome began. "The last one he made was 20 years ago. That means legally everything is divided between you and us. But let's be realistic. Mom, you don't know how to run a company. You never really worked." I felt like I had been slapped. Never really worked? I, who packed boxes until my hands bled. I, who answered the phone for 18 years without a single day off. I, who managed the accounting when we didn't have money to hire anyone. "We studied for this," Vernon continued. "We have the tools, the contacts, the experience. It would be best for everyone if you ceded your share of the company to us. We will take care of everything. We'll give you a monthly allowance. You'll live comfortably." Live comfortably. As if I were an employee who needed a pension. As if 40 years beside Luther meant nothing. "There are also the apartments," Jerome added, opening the folder. "The building downtown, the one in the residential zone, the beach house. They are large properties. Mom, they need maintenance, taxes. You can't handle that alone. We can manage them better, sell them if necessary, invest that money correctly." I stayed silent. My brain wasn't processing what I was hearing. Luther had been dead for 2 days. 2 days. And my sons were already dividing his legacy like vultures over a carcass. "We aren't asking for permission, Mom," Vernon said with a smile that froze my blood. "We are offering you the easy option. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, but we will do it." That night I cried until I ran out of tears. I called Marshall, the lawyer Luther and I had used for 15 years, an honest, loyal man, someone we trusted blindly. Marshall arrived at my house at 9 at night. When I told him what Jerome and Vernon had said, his face hardened. "Francine, this is extortion," Marshall said. "They cannot force you to give up anything. The law protects you. We can fight this. We can—" "I don't want to fight," I interrupted him. My voice sounded empty, dead. "I'm tired, Marshall. I lost Luther. I don't have the strength to fight with my own children." Marshall took my hands. "Then let me fight for you. Don't sign anything. Don't accept anything. Give me time to review everything, please." I accepted, but deep down, a part of me already knew what I was going to do. A part of me remembered something. Something Luther had told me months ago, something I didn't understand at the time, but now made sense. The following days were hell. Jerome called me 3 times a day, demanding answers. Vernon appeared at my house without warning, pressuring me to sign documents. They spoke to me as if I were a senile old woman, as if I didn't understand anything. "Mom, this is for your own good," Jerome would say with that condescending voice that broke my soul. "We don't want you to stress over things you don't understand. Dad would have wanted us to take charge." Dad would have wanted. How easy to speak for a dead man. A week after the funeral, Jerome arrived with papers, many papers. He spread them out on my dining room table as if it were a corporate negotiation and not the dispossession of a widow. Vernon was with him, recording everything on his phone. "For the legal record," they said, as if I were a criminal. "Here is everything detailed, Mom," Jerome explained, pointing to document after document. "The transfer of company shares, the cession of the apartments, the bank movements we need to authorize. It's simple. Just sign here, here, and here." I looked at the papers. The letters danced before my eyes. I couldn't concentrate. The grief for Luther was still so intense I could barely breathe, but something inside me, something small and furious, began to wake up. "I need time," I said with a trembling voice. "I need to talk to Marshall first." Vernon let out a bitter laugh. "Marshall?" "Mom, Marshall is an old lawyer. He doesn't understand modern corporate structures. We hired Preston Sterling, the best tax attorney in the country. He already reviewed everything. It is perfect." Perfect for them, I thought, but I said nothing. "You have until Friday to decide," Jerome said, packing up the papers. "If you don't sign voluntarily, we will initiate a legal process to declare you incapable of managing the assets. We have psychologists who can evaluate your mental state after the loss of Dad. No one would blame you. It's understandable that a woman of your age in emotional shock cannot make rational decisions." I froze. They were threatening to declare me mentally incompetent, my own sons. When they left, I called Marshall immediately. He arrived in less than 30 minutes. I showed him the documents Jerome had left. Marshall read them with growing attention. His face grew paler with every page. "Francine, this is blatant robbery," he finally said. "These documents leave you with nothing. Literally nothing. You don't even retain rights to the house where you live. They are putting you on the street." "Can they do that legally?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Not without your signature," Marshall replied. "But they are betting that you will sign out of pressure, exhaustion, grief. Francine, listen to me well. Don't sign anything. I can fight this. The law is on your side. You are the widow. You have rights. We can—" "Marshall," I interrupted him. My voice sounded strange, calm, too calm. "Do you remember when Luther came to see you 6 months ago? That private meeting you two had, the one you never told me the details about?" Marshall looked at me in surprise. "How do you know about that meeting?" "Because Luther mentioned it to me one night. We were in bed. He couldn't sleep. He told me he had done something important, something that would protect me if he were ever missing. But he never gave me details. He said you knew everything." Silence filled the room. Marshall closed his eyes. When he opened them, there were tears in them. "Luther knew," he whispered. "He knew how his sons were. He knew them better than you, Francine. He saw what they were becoming, the greed, the coldness, and he took measures." "What measures?" I asked, feeling my heart accelerate. Marshall stood up, walked to the window, and remained silent for several seconds that seemed eternal. "I can't tell you yet," he said finally. "Luther made me swear I would only reveal certain information at the exact moment, and that moment hasn't arrived yet. But I need you to trust me. I need you to do exactly what I am going to ask you, even if it seems crazy." "What do you want me to do?" Marshall turned to me. His expression was a mixture of sorrow and determination. "I want you to give them everything. I want you to sign those papers. I want you to hand over every apartment, every share, every penny, everything." I ran out of air. "What? Have you gone crazy too?" "Trust me," Marshall repeated. "Trust Luther. He planned it all. But I need you to act as if you were defeated, as if they had broken you, as if you were really giving them everything out of weakness." I didn't understand anything, but something in Marshall's eyes made me remember all the times Luther trusted him, all the times that man had helped us without asking for anything in return. "Do you promise me this makes sense?" I asked with a broken voice. "I promise you that Luther loved you more than anything in this world, and that he would never leave you unprotected." That night, I didn't sleep. I tossed and turned in the empty bed, hugging Luther's pillow. What had my husband planned? Why so much secrecy? And why was Marshall asking me to surrender when everything in me screamed to fight? Friday arrived too quickly. Jerome and Vernon appeared at 10 in the morning. They brought Preston Sterling with them, a man of about 50, impeccable charcoal gray suit, Italian leather briefcase. He looked at me the way one looks at an annoying bureaucratic hurdle. "Mrs. Gaines," he said with a professional and cold voice, "I understand you have decided to cooperate with the patrimonial transfer. It is the right decision. It will avoid unnecessary legal conflicts and protect the emotional stability of the whole family." Family. What an empty word in his mouth. I sat in my own living room feeling like a stranger. Marshall was by my side. Jerome and Vernon were in front of me, smiling. Those smiles that used to fill me with love and now only provoked nausea. "Before signing," Marshall said with a firm voice, "I want to go on record that my client is acting under emotional pressure, that she considers this decision a mistake, and that she reserves the right to—" "Marshall, it's fine," I interrupted him. My voice sounded tired, defeated, exactly how Marshall had asked me to sound. "I just want this to end. Give them everything. The apartments, the company, the accounts, everything. I don't have the strength to fight anymore." I saw how Jerome's eyes shone with triumph, how Vernon exchanged a look of victory with his brother, how Preston Sterling pulled the final documents from his briefcase with mechanical efficiency. "Very well," said Sterling. "Let us proceed then. Here is the total asset transfer agreement. By signing this document, you cede all rights over the listed properties, business shares, and bank assets to your sons Jerome and Vernon in equal parts. Do you understand the implications?" "Yes," I lied, because I understood nothing. I only trusted that Luther had thought of everything. I signed page after page. My hand trembled, but I didn't stop. Each signature felt like tearing off a piece of my soul. Each scrawl was a betrayal of 40 years of work alongside Luther. When I finished, Sterling collected the documents with satisfaction. "Perfect. These documents will be registered on Monday. From that moment, you," he looked at Jerome and Vernon, "will be the legal owners of all assets." My sons didn't even look at me when they left. Not a hug, not a thank you, not even a goodbye. Just the sound of the door closing and the echo of their laughter in the hallway. I collapsed on the sofa. Marshall sat beside me in silence. After several minutes, he spoke. "Now begins the second part of Luther's plan." "What plan, Marshall?" I finally exploded. "I just gave away everything. Everything we built. For what?" Marshall pulled an envelope from his briefcase. A yellow envelope sealed with Luther's handwriting on the front. It only said, "For Francine, open after the transfer." My hands trembled when I opened it. Inside was a letter. I immediately recognized Luther's uneven handwriting, the kind that always made me smile because it looked like a child's. "My love," the letter began. "If you are reading this, it means I am no longer here. It means our sons showed their true faces, and it means you trusted Marshall as I asked you to. Now pay attention, because what comes next is important." The letter continued with Luther's shaky handwriting. I could imagine his hand writing every word, probably at night, when I was already asleep. How many secrets did he keep to protect me? "Francine, I know you. I know right now you are furious with me for not telling you anything, but I needed your reaction to be genuine. I needed Jerome and Vernon to believe they had really defeated you. Because what they don't know, what no one knows except Marshall, is that everything they just inherited is a time bomb." I stopped. I read the sentence again. A time bomb. What did that mean? "8 months ago, I discovered something," the letter continued. "Vernon borrowed $200,000 from an illegal lender. Jerome forged my signature to use properties as collateral in fraudulent investments. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to destroy you, but that's when I understood who our sons really were. So I took measures that will now begin to activate." I felt a chill run down my back. Marshall watched me in silence, letting me process every word. "The apartments have hidden mortgages. The company has labor lawsuits for $3 million that explode in 90 days. The bank accounts are linked to personal loans that automatically transfer to the new holder. And best of all, there is a clause in the documents you signed today, a clause that Sterling overlooked because the wording is technical and hidden on page 17. That clause specifies that whoever accepts the totality of the assets also accepts the totality of the debts and legal obligations. And my love, there are many debts, many obligations." I let the letter drop. My hands were shaking. I looked at Marshall with wide eyes. "Is it true?" I whispered. "Is all this true?" Marshall nodded slowly. "Every word. Luther spent 6 months structuring this. I helped him with the legal part. It was meticulous, brilliant, and completely secret." But But the properties are worth millions. The company generates fortunes. How can there be more debt than assets? Because Luther created the debt specifically for this, Marshall explained. He took out loans using the properties as collateral. He signed labor contracts with million-dollar severance clauses. He opened business lines of credit, all legal, all documented, and all designed to transfer automatically to whoever inherited the assets. I covered my mouth with my hands. How much? How much do Jerome and Vernon owe now? Approximately $8 million, Marshall replied, and growing every day with interest. The world stopped moving. $8 million. My sons had just inherited a debt of $8 million, believing they were inheriting a fortune. But I signed those documents, I said with rising panic. Am I not responsible too? No. Marshall smiled for the first time in days. Because before the meeting with Sterling, you and I signed other documents. Documents disclaiming the inheritance, documents that legally separate you from all assets and all debts. You formally renounced your share of the inheritance. What you signed afterward was simply a voluntary transfer of something that no longer legally belonged to you. It's a technicality, but it's solid. I took care of that. So, my brain was trying to process the magnitude of what I was hearing. So, they have everything, but they also owe everything. Exactly. And they can't back out now. They already accepted, they already signed, they already registered the documents. It is irreversible. I stood up from the sofa and walked around the room. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. Luther had done this. My husband, the man who loved his children, had created this elaborate trap to punish them for their greed. When will they find out? I asked finally. Soon, Marshall replied. The first mortgage payments are due in 2 weeks. The labor lawsuits will be filed in 30 days. The banks will start demanding payments in 60 days. Everything is scheduled. And when Sterling finally reads the complete documents, when he sees that clause on page 17, he will understand what he did. That night, I read Luther's letter again. There was a last paragraph that broke my heart. My love, I know this seems cruel. I know they are our sons, but I stopped recognizing them a long time ago. They turned into greedy strangers who were only waiting for my death to take what they didn't build. They don't deserve the fruit of our sacrifice. They don't deserve what you and I bled to create. So I gave them exactly what they wanted. Everything. And by everything, I mean the debts, the problems, the consequences of their own avarice. Forgive me if it seems vengeful, but I couldn't let them destroy you. I love you, Francine. I always loved you, and from wherever I am, I will keep protecting you. I cried hugging that letter. I cried for the man who loved me so much he planned my protection even after death. I cried for the sons I lost long before Luther died. And I cried because I finally understood that sometimes the greatest love manifests in the hardest actions. The following days were strange. Jerome and Vernon didn't call me, didn't come to visit me. I assumed they were celebrating their victory, dividing their loot, planning what to do with their new fortune. They had no idea what was coming. I moved into a small apartment that Marshall helped me rent. Just 1 bedroom in a modest building. I didn't need more. I sold some of my personal items that I still had. Jewelry Luther gave me, an antique watch, some paintings. I gathered enough money to live for several months with peace of mind. It was strange feeling poor again, but it was also liberating. I had no mansion to maintain, no staff to pay, no corporate responsibilities, just me, my small apartment, and the memory of Luther keeping me company. 2 weeks after the transfer, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Mrs. Gaines? The voice was tense, professional. This is Preston Sterling. I need to see you urgently. It's about the documents we signed. I felt a rush of adrenaline. It had begun. What is happening, Mr. Sterling? I prefer to speak in person. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 10? I don't have a car, I lied. I had sold my car, and his office was far. There was a silence. Then I will go to you. Give me your address. I gave him the address of my new apartment. When I hung up, I called Marshall immediately. Sterling wants to see me, I told him. I think he found something. Perfect, Marshall replied. His voice sounded satisfied. Let him come. Let him talk. Don't admit anything. Don't promise anything. Just listen. The next day, Preston Sterling knocked on my door exactly at 10. When I opened it, I almost didn't recognize him. The impeccable man in the charcoal gray suit now looked disheveled. His tie was loose. He had deep dark circles under his eyes, and in his hands trembled a folder full of documents marked with yellow highlighter. Mrs. Gaines, he said without greeting, we need to talk about what you signed 2 weeks ago. Come in, I said, stepping aside. Although this apartment is small, it's not like my old house. Sterling entered, looking around with evident surprise. You live here now? Yes, after giving everything to my sons. This is what I can afford. I saw him swallow hard. He sat on my small second-hand sofa. He opened the folder with shaking hands. Ma'am, there is a serious problem. A very serious problem with the transfer documents. What problem? I asked with an innocent voice. Sterling pulled out several papers. All were marked with furious annotations. The properties your sons inherited have massive mortgages. The company has pending million-dollar lawsuits. There are personal loans linked to the bank accounts, and there is a clause on page 17 of the main agreement that establishes that whoever accepts the assets accepts all associated financial obligations. Oh, I said simply, and that is bad? Sterling looked at me as if I had just said something absurd. Is it bad, Mrs. Gaines? Your sons inherited approximately $8 million in debt, debts that are in their name now, debts they must pay or face foreclosures, lawsuits, even criminal charges for some breached labor contracts. I maintained my neutral expression, innocent, as if I didn't understand the magnitude of what he was saying. But they also have the apartments, the company. They can sell everything and pay. No, it's not that simple. Sterling ran a hand through his hair, ruining his perfect styling. The apartments are mortgaged for more than their current commercial value. The company has assets, yes, but it also has immediate obligations that exceed its liquidity. If they try to sell quickly, they will lose money. If they don't sell, creditors will seize everything. It is a perfect financial trap. How terrible, I said without emotion. My poor sons. Sterling leaned forward. His eyes studied me with intensity. Ma'am, you signed these documents. You knew your husband. He knew about these debts. My husband handled the business, I replied carefully. I was just his wife. He never told me financial details. It was a lie Marshall had taught me to tell, but Sterling had no way to prove otherwise. I need you to declare that officially, Sterling said, pulling out a small recorder. I need you to confirm that you had no knowledge of these obligations when you signed the transfer. Why? I asked, though I knew perfectly well why. Because your sons are going to sue. They are going to try to annul the transfer alleging concealment of information. They are going to say that you and your husband deceived them deliberately, and I need proof that you acted in good faith. I smiled internally. How quickly things changed. 2 weeks ago, Sterling treated me like a nuisance. Now he needed me desperately. I am not going to record anything, I said firmly. If my sons want to talk to me, let them come themselves. You can leave, Mr. Sterling. Sterling turned pale. Ma'am, understand the gravity. If this reaches court, everyone will be harmed. Your reputation, your husband's memory, Your sons. It is better to resolve this privately." "Resolve how?" I asked. "Do you want me to give something back? I have nothing. Look where I live. I sold my jewelry to pay for this place. I don't have a car. I don't have savings. I gave everything to them." And it was true. Technically, legally, I had nothing because Luther had ensured that everything that really mattered was protected in structures that neither Jerome nor Vernon nor Sterling could touch. Sterling stood up, defeated. "Your sons will come to see you soon. They are very upset." "Let them come," I said, walking him to the door. "I always have time for my sons." When he left, I called Marshall immediately. "Sterling was here. He discovered everything. He says Jerome and Vernon are going to sue." "Perfect," Marshall replied with satisfaction. "Let them sue. They have no case. The documents are impeccable. They accepted voluntarily. No one forced them. And you formally renounced the inheritance before any transfer. They are trapped." "When does this end, Marshall?" I asked with real exhaustion. "When can I have peace?" "Soon, Francine, very soon. Just stay calm. Luther planned it all. Trust him." 3 days later, Jerome and Vernon appeared at my apartment. They didn't ring the doorbell. They pounded on the door with fury. When I opened, their faces were masks of pure rage. "What did you do to us?" screamed Jerome, pushing me inside. "What did you do to us?" Vernon slammed the door shut. Both surrounded me like predators cornering prey. They were no longer my sons. They were strangers, violent and desperate. "I don't understand what you're talking about," I said, backing away. My heart beat forcefully, but I kept my voice steady. "The debts!" Vernon howled. "The loans, the mortgages, everything is rotten. Dad left us a bomb and you knew it." "I didn't know anything," I lied. "Your father handled everything. I just signed what you asked me to sign." "Liar!" Jerome punched the wall next to my head. "You planned this. You and that miserable lawyer set a trap for us." "You asked me for everything," I said with a trembling but clear voice. "You demanded the apartments, the company, the accounts. I just gave you what you wanted, everything, including what came with it." "We are going to annul this," Vernon threatened, bringing his face close to mine. "We are going to sue you. We are going to prove that you deceived us, and when it's over, you are going to pay every penny of those debts." "Sue me," I replied, surprising myself with my own courage. "I have nothing. I live in this rented apartment eating toast and coffee. I sell my belongings to survive. What are you going to take from me? My second-hand sofa?" Jerome grabbed my arm tightly. "This doesn't end here. Mom, you are going to regret this." "Let me go," I said with a coldness I didn't know I possessed. "Or I call the police for assault." He let me go. Both looked at me with pure hate. Hate that probably was always there, hidden under fake smiles and obligated hugs. "You no longer have sons," Vernon spat before leaving. "You are dead to us." The door closed with violence. I let myself fall onto the sofa, shaking, but not from fear, from relief. The farce had finally ended. Finally, I could stop pretending we were a family. The following weeks were a legal whirlwind. Jerome and Vernon hired 3 different firms to find some way to annul the transfer. They filed lawsuits alleging emotional coercion. They argued that I had acted under mental distress. They invented stories of manipulation and deceit. But Marshall had done his job perfectly. Every document was in order. Every signature was voluntary. Every step of the process was legally registered. And most importantly, I had formally renounced the inheritance before any transfer, legally separating myself from all assets and liabilities. The judges reviewed the case 3 times. 3 times they arrived at the same conclusion. Jerome and Vernon had voluntarily accepted a complete inheritance, including all its obligations. There was no fraud, there was no deceit, only consequences. Meanwhile, creditors began to pressure. Mortgages came due, labor lawsuits advanced, Bank loans demanded immediate payments. Jerome and Vernon tried to sell the apartments, but buyers disappeared when they saw the associated debts. They tried to close the company, but labor contracts forced them to pay million-dollar severances. They were trapped in the perfect web Luther had woven, a web of their own greed. 2 months after the transfer, Marshall called me. "Francine, there is a final hearing. The judge wants to close all pending cases. Jerome and Vernon are going to make one last attempt. Are you ready?" "I am ready," I replied. And it was true. I was ready to end this once and for all. The hearing was in a small, cold courtroom. I arrived with Marshall. Jerome and Vernon arrived with Preston Sterling and 2 more lawyers I didn't know. Everyone looked tense, desperate. The judge, an older man with a serious face, reviewed the documents one last time. The silence in the room was dense, heavy. I could hear my own breathing. "I have exhaustively reviewed this case," the judge began. "I have analyzed every argument presented by the plaintiffs, and I have arrived at a definitive conclusion." Jerome and Vernon leaned forward, hopeful. The transfer of assets was legal, voluntary, and completely valid. The plaintiffs accepted the inheritance with full knowledge that they were accepting both assets and liabilities. The fact that they did not adequately investigate the financial obligations before accepting does not constitute fraud on the part of the defendant. I saw Jerome's face decompose, saw Vernon close his eyes, defeated. "Furthermore," continued the judge, "I have found evidence that Mrs. Gaines formally renounced her share of the inheritance before any transfer, legally separating herself from all associated assets and liabilities. Therefore, she has no responsibility regarding the inherited debts." Preston Sterling stood up clumsily. "Your Honor, but the clause on page 17—" "The clause your firm failed to read properly," the judge interrupted with a sharp tone. He continued with a firm voice, leaving no room for appeal. "The clause on page 17 clearly establishes that the acceptance of assets implies the acceptance of all associated financial, legal, and contractual obligations. This clause is written in standard legal language. There is no ambiguity, there is no fine print hidden. It is there in black and white waiting to be read by any competent lawyer." Sterling sank into his seat. His face had lost all color. I saw Jerome looking at him with murderous fury. Vernon had his hands clenched into white fists on the table. "The professional negligence of the plaintiff's counsel does not constitute grounds to annul a legal contract," sentenced the judge. "The documents are in order. The signatures are authentic. The process was transparent. Case closed." The bang of the gavel resonated in the room like a gunshot. Jerome stood up so abruptly his chair fell backward. Vernon had tears of rage in his eyes. Sterling gathered his papers with trembling hands, knowing he had just destroyed his own reputation. I walked out of the room with Marshall by my side. I didn't look back. I didn't say anything. I just walked toward the exit, feeling like a weight of 40 years was lifting from my shoulders. Outside the courthouse, the sun shone with unusual intensity. It was a beautiful November day. Marshall smiled at me with genuine warmth. "Luther would be proud," he said simply. "Luther was a genius," I replied, feeling tears in my eyes. But this time they weren't from pain. They were from gratitude. He protected me even after death. "He loved you more than anything in the world," Marshall said. "And he wanted to ensure you lived the rest of your life in peace, without burdens, without exploiters, without children who only saw you as a source of money." We stood in silence for a few moments. Then Marshall pulled another envelope from his briefcase, another envelope with Luther's handwriting. "He asked me to give you this after the final hearing," he explained. "He said it was important for you to read it when everything was over." I took the envelope with shaking hands. I opened it right there, standing on the courthouse steps, with the sun warming my face. My love, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means everything went as planned. It means you are free. Free from the greed of our sons. Free from the obligations that bound us for decades. Free to live as you always wanted, but we never could because we were building an empire. I had to stop. The tears made it difficult to read. I know you wonder if I was too cruel, if I should have given them a chance. But Francine, I saw how they spoke to you. I saw how they looked at you. I saw how they counted the days waiting for my death to take what was ours. They didn't deserve our sacrifice. They didn't deserve the fruit of 40 years of work. The letter continued on the next page. Now, about your future. Marshall has specific instructions. There are accounts they never found. Investments overseas under legal structures that protect them. It is not a fortune, but it is enough for you to live comfortably for the rest of your life without worries. Approximately $1,200,000 that are completely separated from everything else. I almost dropped the letter. $1,200,000. Luther had hidden more than $1 million. I don't want you living in rented apartments eating toast and coffee. The letter continued with a touch of humor that was pure Luther. I want you to travel, to see places we always dreamed of visiting but never had time for. Buy books without looking at the price. Drink coffee in the nice cafes you always liked. Live, my love. Really live. Tears ran freely down my face. Marshall put a hand on my shoulder. The accounts are in your name, he explained softly. Completely legal, completely separated from the inheritance. Luther built them up over years specifically for this. For your protection, for your future. I can't believe it, I whispered. I can't believe he did all this. He loved you, Marshall repeated, and true love is proven in actions, not words. That night, in my small rented apartment, I finished reading Luther's letter. There was a final paragraph that broke me and healed me at the same time. Don't hate our sons, Francine. Just pity them. They became slaves to their own greed. Now they will live years paying debts, facing lawsuits, regretting every selfish decision they made. That is their prison. You, on the other hand, are free, finally free. Live for both of us, my love. Live the life we built together, but that I can no longer share with you. And when your moment comes, many years later, I hope, we will meet again. I will wait for you as I always waited for you, with all my eternal love, Luther. I folded the letter carefully. I kept it in a small wooden box along with the first letter. Those 2 letters were now my most valuable possessions, more than any apartment, more than any company. They were proof of a love that transcended death. The following months were strange and wonderful at the same time. Marshall helped me access the accounts Luther had prepared. It was true. There was over $1 million distributed in secure investments and protected accounts. I bought a small but bright apartment, 2 bedrooms, a balcony overlooking the park, a kitchen where I could make coffee every morning without rushing. It wasn't a mansion. It was better. It was mine, really mine. I started doing things I had never done. I signed up for painting classes. I discovered I had a talent for watercolors. I adopted a gray cat I found on the street and named him Luther. The cat, not my husband, obviously, although the name was a tribute. I began reading novels I had put off for decades. I traveled, not much, but enough. I went to the beach where Luther and I spent our honeymoon 40 years ago. I sat on the same sand, looked at the same ocean, and spoke to him as if he were there with me. You did it, I told the wind. You saved me. You gave me a second chance to live. And Jerome and Vernon, I saw them one last time, 6 months after the hearing. It was accidental. I was leaving a coffee shop downtown when I saw them walking down the street. They looked haggard, suits wrinkled, faces aged by stress. Vernon saw me first. We looked at each other for 3 seconds that seemed eternal. I saw in his eyes something that could have been regret or perhaps just exhaustion. He looked away and kept walking. Jerome didn't even see me. He was talking on the phone, arguing with someone about payments and deadlines. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel revenge accomplished. I only felt a deep sadness for the men they had become and immense gratitude for the man who loved me enough to protect me from them. 1 year after the final hearing, the lives of Jerome and Vernon had become a daily hell. I knew this not because I sought them out, but because the news arrived on its own. Marshall kept me informed not out of cruelty, but because I needed to know if they would try anything else against me. The apartments were foreclosed on one by one. First the one downtown, then the one in the residential zone. The beach house was auctioned for a fraction of its real value to pay part of the mortgages, but not even that was enough. The debts kept growing with interest piling up like an avalanche. The company Luther built over 30 years went bankrupt in 8 months. The labor lawsuits exploded exactly as he had planned. 200 employees claiming compensation for unfair dismissals, contracts Luther had signed specifically with extreme protection clauses for the workers, clauses that cost fortunes to break. Jerome tried to declare Chapter 7 bankruptcy, but the creditor's lawyers proved he had hidden assets, that he had transferred properties to friends' names, that he had tried to evade his legal responsibilities. The judge punished him severely. Not only did they deny the bankruptcy discharge, but they added additional fines for financial fraud. Vernon had to sell his car, his luxury watch, even the furniture in his apartment. He moved to a place smaller than my current apartment. Getting a job was impossible. His name was stained in the business world. Everyone knew what he had done, how he had tried to dispossess his own widowed mother. Preston Sterling lost his law license temporarily for gross professional negligence. No major client hired him again. The man who bragged about being the best tax attorney in the country ended up doing cheap consultations in shared offices. I continued my quiet, simple, free life. One afternoon in March, exactly 14 months after Luther's death, I was watering the plants on my balcony when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting visitors. Marshall always let me know before coming. I opened the door cautiously. It was Camille, the secretary who worked with Luther for 20 years, a woman of about 50, gray hair tied in a bun, kind eyes. I had seen her few times, but Luther always spoke well of her. "Mrs. Gaines," she said with a nervous voice, "excuse me for coming without notice, but I need to talk to you. It is important." I let her in. I made coffee. We sat in my small living room with Luther the cat sleeping on the sofa between us. "Mr. Gaines asked me for something before he died," Camille began after taking a sip of coffee. "He made me swear I would only come to see you after a year, that I would give you time to process everything. And now that that time has passed, I need to fulfill my promise." She pulled an envelope from her purse. Another envelope. How many secrets had Luther kept? "This is for you," Camille said, handing me the envelope. "But first let me tell you something. Something Mr. Gaines wanted you to know." I settled into the sofa, preparing for another revelation. "2 years ago, your sons came to the office," Camille began. Her voice trembled slightly. "They thought Mr. Gaines wasn't there, but he had returned early from a meeting. He heard them talking in the boardroom, talking about how they would split everything when he died, laughing at you, saying you were a foolish old woman who didn't understand business, that you didn't deserve anything because you never really worked." I felt a lump in my throat. I knew my sons were cruel, but hearing this hurt me in new ways. "Mr. Gaines entered the room," Camille continued. "He confronted them. Jerome and Vernon turned pale. They tried to justify themselves, say it was a joke, but Mr. Gaines knew them. He saw the truth in their eyes. That day when they left, he locked himself in his office. He cried. I heard him cry for an hour. I had never seen Mr. Gaines cry. Tears ran down my face. Now I imagined Luther, that strong man who built an empire, crying over the betrayal of his own sons. That same day he called me to his office, Camille said. He told me, Camille, I am going to do something that will seem cruel, but it is the only thing I can do to protect Francine. She cannot know yet. No one can know. But when I am no longer here, when it's all over, I want you to tell her this. I want her to know it wasn't revenge. It was love. Pure love for the only person who really mattered to me in this world. Camille took out a handkerchief and dried her own tears. After that, Mr. Gaines began to plan everything. Every debt, every contract, every clause. He worked until dawn. I helped him with the documents, Marshall with the legal part, all in absolute secrecy. No one else knew. Not the accountants, not the managers, no one. He spent 6 months building the perfect trap. She paused. But every time he signed a new loan, every time he created a new obligation, he told me the same thing. This is for Francine, so she lives free, so they don't destroy her like they tried to destroy me with their greed. I opened the envelope Camille had brought me. Inside was a short note, Luther's handwriting, shakier than in previous letters, probably written shortly before his death. Francine, if Camille is giving you this, it means more than a year has passed. It means I hope you have healed a little, that you have started living again. I want you to know something important. Never doubt that you did well. As a mother, you gave everything to our sons. As a wife, you gave me 40 years of perfect happiness. You failed in nothing. They failed. They chose greed over love, and the consequences of that choice are theirs alone. Live without guilt, my love, without regrets. You are the best person I ever knew, and I will love you for all eternity. I hugged Camille, 2 women crying in a small apartment, remembering an extraordinary man who loved so deeply that his love continued protecting even after death. When Camille left, I sat on the balcony watching the sunset. Luther the cat curled up in my lap. The sky was painted orange and pink. It was beautiful. Luther always loved sunsets. Thank you, I told the sky. Thank you for loving me like this. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for giving me this new life. The wind blew softly, moving the curtains, and for a moment, just a moment, I felt as if Luther were there with me, as if he were telling me, I am always with you, my love, always. Months passed, turning into years. I turned 66, then 67. Life was simple, but full of meaning. My paintings improved, the cat grew, the balcony plants bloomed every spring. Marshall became more than my lawyer. He became my friend. He came to drink coffee once a week. He told me stories about Luther I didn't know, anecdotes from their meetings, private jokes they shared. It was like keeping a piece of my husband alive. One day, 2 years after everything, Marshall arrived with news. Francine, there is something you should know. Jerome requested to see you. My heart skipped a beat. What for? He didn't specify. He just said he needs to talk to you, that it is important, that it is not about money. I thought about refusing, locking that door forever. But something in me, perhaps curiosity, perhaps the remains of maternal love that never completely die, made me accept. Tell him he can come, I decided finally. But you have to be here with me. Of course, Marshall replied. I won't leave you alone with him. 3 days later, Jerome knocked on my door. When I opened it, I almost didn't recognize him. The elegant man in the expensive suit had been replaced by someone gaunt in simple clothes, prematurely gray hair. He was 38 years old, but he looked 50. "Hi, Mom," he said with a broken voice. There was no arrogance, no coldness, only deep exhaustion. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. Marshall was already seated in the living room, watchful. Jerome entered slowly, looking around as if seeing my apartment for the first time. Perhaps he was really seeing it, with different eyes than 2 years ago. He sat on the edge of the sofa. His hands were shaking. Luther the cat watched him suspiciously before jumping off the furniture and hiding in my bedroom. Animals always know. "Thank you for seeing me," Jerome began. His voice was barely a whisper. "I know I have no right to be here. I know I don't deserve even a minute of your time." I sat across from him. I said nothing, just waited. "I have spent 2 years in hell," he continued. "I lost everything. The apartment, the car, the savings, my reputation. Vernon is worse off than me. He lives in a rented room. He works as a night driver to pay debts. We still owe millions. Millions we will never be able to pay completely." I remained silent. Part of me felt compassion. Another part, the part that remembered how they treated me, remained cold. "But I didn't come to complain," Jerome said, looking up to meet my eyes directly. "I came to tell you something I should have said a long time ago. I came to ask for forgiveness." The words hung in the air. Forgiveness. A word I never thought I'd hear from his lips. Forgiveness for how I treated you when Dad died. Forgiveness for seeing you only as a source of money. Forgiveness for scorning you, for humiliating you, for trying to take everything you had built together with him for 40 years. His voice broke. Forgiveness for not understanding that you were the reason Dad succeeded, that without you he never would have built anything, that you worked just as much or more than him, just in different ways. I felt a lump in my throat. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't expected genuine repentance. "It took me 2 years to understand it," Jerome continued, tears running down his face. 2 years of losing everything to understand what really matters. And what matters isn't the apartments, nor the companies, nor the bank accounts. What matters is family, love, respect, things I had and destroyed out of greed. He wiped his tears with the back of his hand. He looked so vulnerable, so broken, so different from the arrogant man who demanded everything 2 years ago. "I know Dad planned all this," he said, surprising me. At first I was furious with him. I thought it was pure cruelty, but now I understand it was a lesson, the most painful lesson of my life. He gave me exactly what I asked for, everything. And by giving me everything, he taught me that everything means nothing without the right people by your side. Marshall looked at me. I kept my eyes on Jerome. "I didn't come to ask you for money," he clarified quickly. "I didn't come to beg you to help us pay the debts. I came only to tell you that I am deeply sorry, and that if one day, at some moment, you can find in your heart some forgiveness for me, I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve it." Silence filled the room. Only the ticking of the wall clock could be heard. Jerome waited. Marshall waited. I searched inside myself for the right answer. "Jerome," I said finally. My voice sounded stronger than I expected. "For 2 years, I have lived with what you did to me. I have relived every humiliation, every threat, every moment you treated me like trash. And do you know what was the worst? It wasn't losing the properties. It wasn't signing papers. It was realizing that the sons I raised, that I loved, that I protected, never saw me as a person, only as an obstacle between them and the money." Jerome hung his head. More tears fell onto his hands. But I also spent 2 years learning something, I continued. I learned that resentment weighs you down, that rage consumes, that you can be right in your pain but still let that pain destroy you from the inside. I breathed deep before continuing. Your father left you that lesson wrapped in debts and losses. I am not going to add another lesson wrapped in eternal hate. So yes, Jerome, I forgive you. Not because you deserve it yet, but because I deserve peace, and forgiveness isn't a gift for you, it's a gift for me. Jerome sobbed openly. Thank you, Mom. Thank you. But listen to me well, I said firmly. Forgiving does not mean forgetting. It doesn't mean we will go back to being what we were. That died when you chose greed. What we can build now, if anything, is something new, something based on honesty, and that will take time. A lot of time. I understand, Jerome said, wiping his face. I don't expect more than that. Just knowing that one day maybe we can have a coffee together without you hating me. One day, I repeated. It wasn't a promise, it was a possibility. Jerome stood up to leave. At the door, he stopped. Mom, one more thing. Dad was a genius. He was brilliant in business. But what really made him special was how much he loved you. I saw him look at you when he thought no one noticed. He looked at you as if you were the only real thing in the world. And he was right. You were the only real thing, the only thing worth it. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. When he left, I collapsed on the sofa. Marshall approached and put a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, he said softly. Luther would be proud. You think? I asked, wiping tears I didn't know I was shedding. I'm sure. He wanted them to learn, and it seems at least one is learning. And Vernon? I asked. Marshall sighed. I don't know. Vernon is more broken than Jerome, more bitter. He blames everyone but himself. Maybe one day he'll wake up, or maybe not. That is his choice. The following months were strange. Jerome called me every 2 weeks. Short conversations, uncomfortable at first, but gradually, very gradually, we found a rhythm. We didn't talk about money. We didn't talk about the past. We talked about simple things. The weather, a book he read, a movie he saw. It was like meeting a stranger who coincidentally shared my blood, and perhaps that was exactly what we needed, to start from zero. Vernon never called. Marshall told me he had left the state. He went to work in construction somewhere else. He sent money every month to pay his debts, but he never returned. Maybe the shame was too great. Maybe pride stopped him from admitting his mistake. Or maybe he simply chose to run instead of face it. 3 years after Luther's death, I was on my balcony painting a sunset when my phone rang. It was Jerome. Mom, I have news, he said with a voice that sounded different, lighter. I got a stable job. It's not a big deal, accountant at a small company, but it's honest and enough to live. I'm even paying off the debts little by little. I smiled. I'm glad, Jerome. I'm truly glad. And Mom, I met someone, a woman. Her name is Elise. She's a teacher. She doesn't have money. She doesn't have connections, but she has a huge heart and makes me want to be a better person. That is wonderful, I said, feeling genuine warmth. I would like to meet her someday. Really? The surprise in his voice was evident. Really? If she is important to you, I want to meet her. There was silence. Then Jerome said something I didn't expect. I love you, Mom. I know I have no right to say it after everything, but it's true. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it to you. I hung up the phone with tears in my eyes, but this time they were good tears. Tears of hope, of healing, of possibility. That night I spoke to the photo of Luther I had on my nightstand. You're seeing this, right? Your plan worked. Not only did it protect me, it also gave our son the chance to become someone better. You were wiser than anyone imagined. The wind moved the curtains, and in my heart, I felt Luther's response. I always knew true love finds a way. Always. 4 years after Luther's death, my life had found a rhythm I never imagined possible. I woke up every morning without an alarm, made coffee slowly, fed Luther the cat, who was now a grumpy 7-year-old, and sat on my balcony to watch the city wake up. It was a simple life, a life worth more than all the apartments and companies in the world. My paintings improved so much that a small neighborhood gallery accepted to exhibit some. I didn't sell many, maybe 5 or 6 in 2 years, but every sale filled me with inexplicable pride. Someone had seen my work and decided it was worth hanging in their house. That meant more than any figure in a bank account. Jerome kept his word. Every 2 weeks he called me. The conversations became longer, more natural. He told me about Elise, the teacher he met, how she helped him understand that a person's value isn't measured in properties, but in actions, how she made him laugh again after years of bitterness. One day in April, Jerome appeared at my door. He was nervous, twisting a cap in his hands. "Mom, I'd like to introduce you to someone." Behind him was Elise, a woman of about 35, brown hair tied in a ponytail, warm eyes behind round glasses, genuine smile. She wore a simple olive green dress and worn shoes that spoke of a life of honest work. "Mrs. Gaines," Elise said, extending her hand. "I have heard so much about you. It is an honor to meet you." Finally, I invited her in. I made coffee and brought out cookies I had baked that morning. We sat in my small living room, and for the first time in years, my apartment felt full of real family life. Elise told me about her work as an elementary school teacher, how she loved her students despite the low salary and difficult conditions, how she believed education was the only real way to change the world. She spoke with genuine passion, with bright eyes. And I saw how Jerome looked at her. He looked at her the way Luther used to look at me, with pure love and deep admiration. "Jerome told me what happened," Elise said after a while. Her tone was careful but honest. "He told me about the mistakes he made, about how he hurt the person who loved him most in the world. And I want you to know that I am helping him be better, not because I think I can fix him, but because I believe we all deserve a second chance if we really work for it." I liked Elise immediately, not for what she said, but for how she said it. Without judging me, without pretending to understand my pain, just acknowledging and respecting it. "Jerome is lucky to have found you," I said sincerely. "And you have a man who is learning one of life's hardest lessons, that the consequences of our actions don't disappear, but we can choose who we want to be after facing them." That afternoon they stayed for 3 hours. We talked about everything except the past. Elise showed me photos of her students. Jerome told me about his job as an accountant at a small firm. He didn't earn much, barely enough to live and pay his monthly debts. But there was pride in his voice when he spoke of doing things correctly. When they left, Jerome hugged me at the door. A real hug, long, with tears in his eyes. "Thank you for giving me this chance, Mom. Thank you for not closing the door forever." "We all deserve a chance to grow," I replied, "even when we grow through pain." Months passed. Jerome and Elise became part of my life again, but in a different way. It was no longer the relationship of a mother who gives to children who take. It was something more balanced, more honest. They came to visit every 2 weeks. Sometimes they brought food and we cooked together. Other times we just drank coffee and talked. Elise taught me how to use my phone better. She showed me how to look for painting tutorials on the internet, how to connect with other artists in local groups, little things that opened my world in unexpected ways. One afternoon in July, 5 years after Luther's death, I was organizing old papers when I found a box I had forgotten. Inside were old photographs. Luther and I at our wedding, so young we looked like children playing at being adults. Luther holding Jerome, a newborn with a terrified and amazed expression. Vernon taking his first steps while Luther held his hands. I sat on the floor, surrounded by those memories, and for the first time in years, I could look at them without tearing pain, only with gentle nostalgia, with gratitude for the good moments we had before everything got complicated. "You did well, my love," I told the photo of Luther at our wedding. "Your plan worked. Not only did you save me, you also gave Jerome the chance to find himself, to become the man he could always be, but greed wouldn't let him see." That night, I dreamed of Luther for the first time in months. We were in our original little shop, that 20-square-foot place where it all began. He was organizing boxes of parts. I was doing the accounting in my worn notebook. We were young again, poor but happy, full of dreams. In the dream, Luther turned to me and smiled, that smile that made me fall in love 45 years ago. "We made it, Francine. We built something beautiful. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours." I woke up with tears on my cheeks, but with peace in my heart. August brought unexpected news. Marshall arrived at my apartment with a serious expression. My heart raced, thinking something bad had happened. "Francine, I have information about Vernon," he said, sitting on my sofa. "He has been trying to contact you." "Vernon? I hadn't heard anything from him in over 3 years. What does he want?" "I don't know exactly. He contacted me first. He asked if you would be willing to speak with him. I told him I would ask you, but that I couldn't promise anything." My stomach turned. Jerome had been difficult, but at least he came with genuine humility. Would Vernon come with the same repentance, or would he come with more rage, more blame, more poison? "Where is he?" I asked finally. "He returned to the state 2 months ago. He is living in a rented room on the outskirts. He works in construction during the day and does deliveries at night. He keeps paying his debts, but he still has years left." "And why does he want to see me now?" Marshall sighed. "He says he has something important to tell you, something he needs to say in person. But Francine, you have no obligation to see him, especially if you don't feel ready." I thought about it for days. Was I ready to face Vernon? Jerome had been a long and painful process, but eventually healing. Would Vernon be the same, or would he just reopen wounds that were barely starting to close? Finally, I decided I needed to try. Not for Vernon, but for me. Because if I could forgive one of my sons, maybe I could find space in my heart to forgive the other too. "Tell him he can come," I informed Marshall a week later. "But I want you to be present, and if at any moment I feel uncomfortable, I want him to leave." "Of course," agreed Marshall. "I won't leave you alone with him." Vernon arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. When I opened the door, the impact was even greater than with Jerome. Vernon, who was always the vainest, the most concerned with his image, was unrecognizable. He had lost weight. His clothes were work clothes, stained with paint and cement. His hands were calloused and rough. He had new scars on his arms. Construction work had left deep marks. But what impacted me most were his eyes. There was no longer arrogance, no longer coldness, only infinite tiredness and something that might be shame. "Hi, Mom," he said with a hoarse voice, as if he had cried a lot recently, or as if he had forgotten how to speak softly. "Vernon," I replied, stepping aside. "Come in." He entered slowly, looking at my apartment with the same expression Jerome had years ago. Surprise, perhaps guilt upon seeing how small it was compared to the mansions he believed I deserved. He sat where Marshall indicated. I sat opposite him. Luther the cat appeared, sniffed Vernon, and surprisingly jumped into his lap. Vernon froze, as if he didn't know what to do. "Pet him," I said softly. "He doesn't bite." Vernon ran his rough hand through the cat's fur, and to my surprise began to cry. Silently at first, Then, with deep sobs that shook his whole body, "I'm sorry," was the only thing he could say between sobs. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." And there in my small living room, with the afternoon sun coming through the curtains, my second son broke completely. He broke in the way he needed to break to be able to start rebuilding himself. I said nothing, just let him cry, because sometimes words aren't necessary. Sometimes tears say everything that pride didn't allow to be said for years. Vernon cried for nearly 10 minutes. I waited in silence, petting the cat that was now in my lap after abandoning Vernon's. Marshall remained still in his chair, a silent witness to this breaking point. Finally, Vernon wiped his face with the sleeves of his work shirt. His eyes were red and swollen. He looked completely defeated, but also strangely more human than ever. "I didn't come to ask for forgiveness," he began with a hoarse voice. "Well, yes, I came for that, but I know I don't deserve it. I came mainly to tell you something you need to know, something I have carried for 5 years, and that is killing me inside." I leaned forward, intrigued and cautious at the same time. "When Dad died, I didn't just want the money," Vernon confessed. "I hated him. I hated that everyone admired him. I hated that you loved him so much. I hated living in his shadow, knowing I would never be as good as him. So when he died, part of me was glad. Not because I wanted him dead, but because finally I could take what he built and prove that I was better than him." The words fell like stones in still water. Each one created waves of new pain. "But I wasn't better than him," Vernon continued with fresh tears. "I wasn't even half the man Dad was. And the worst part is that it took 5 years of misery to understand it. 5 years working 18 hours a day in construction, sleeping in miserable rooms, eating the cheapest food, paying debts that will never end. 5 years to understand that Dad wasn't great because of the money he made. He was great because of how he loved, because of how he protected you even after death." He wiped his tears roughly, as if angry with himself for showing emotion. 3 months ago, I had an accident at the construction site," he said, showing me a large scar on his left arm. "A beam almost crushed me. I was saved by inches. And when I was lying in the hospital alone, with no one coming to visit me because I pushed everyone away with my pride and rage, I thought, if I die now, what will I have left behind? What will I have built?" And the answer was nothing. Nothing except pain and debts. Vernon took a deep breath before continuing. "That's when I understood why Dad did what he did. It wasn't cruelty. It was the last lesson he could give us. He gave us exactly what we asked for, everything. And by giving us everything, he showed us that everything, without love, without family, without values, is absolutely nothing. It is worse than nothing. It is a prison." "And what are you going to do with that understanding?" I asked finally. My voice sounded firmer than I expected. "I am going to keep paying my debts," Vernon replied. "I have probably 10 years left, but now I do it differently. I don't do it with rage anymore. I do it as penance, as a way to clean the filth I was. And when I finish, if I'm still alive, I want to be someone Dad would have been proud to call son." "And me?" I asked. "What do you want from me?" Vernon looked at me directly. "Nothing. Mom, I don't want anything from you. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to let me back into your life. I just wanted you to know that I regret it, that I understood, that I finally grew up, although I took too long and lost too much in the process." We stayed in silence. The clock on the wall marked the seconds. The cat snored softly in my lap. Marshall watched, waiting for my reaction. "Vernon," I said finally, "your brother also came to see me almost 2 years ago. He also asked for forgiveness, and I told him something that now I am going to tell you. Forgiving is not a gift for you, it is a gift for me, because I deserve peace, and resentment doesn't give me peace. I saw hope born in Vernon's eyes, but I continued firmly. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean we will have the relationship we had before. That relationship died when you chose greed over love. What we can build now, if we build anything at all, will be completely new. And honestly, I don't know if I am ready for that yet. Vernon nodded. I understand, and that's okay. Just knowing that one day maybe you could not hate me, that is more than I deserve. I don't hate you, I said, surprising myself with my own truth. I am disappointed. I am hurt, but I don't hate you, and that will have to be enough for now. Vernon stood up to leave. At the door, he stopped just as Jerome had done years ago. Mom, one last thing. Dad loved you more than anything in the world. And he was right. You were the only thing worth it. Sorry it took me so long to see it. When he left, I sat processing everything. Marshall approached and put his hand on my shoulder. 2 repentant sons, he said softly. Luther not only protected you, he gave them the chance to become better men. I wish there was another way, I said with sadness. One that didn't hurt so much. Maybe there wasn't, Marshall replied. Sometimes pain is the only teacher that works for certain students. The following months were a period of slow healing. Jerome kept coming regularly with Elise. He told me Vernon had contacted him, that they had spoken for the first time in years, that they were trying to rebuild their relationship as brothers, not as accomplices in crime. Vernon changed, Mom, Jerome told me one afternoon. He really changed. He isn't the same arrogant and bitter man. Suffering broke him, but it also made him more human. Suffering does that, I replied. Either it destroys you completely, or it rebuilds you better. It seems it is rebuilding you too. Vernon didn't come back to visit me for months, but he sent me short messages every 2 weeks. Hi, Mom. Just wanted you to know I'm okay. Hope you are too. Simple messages, without pressure, without expectations. And slowly, very slowly, I began to reply. I'm fine, Vernon. Take care. Nothing elaborate, but it was a start. 6 years after Luther's death, on the exact anniversary, I did something I hadn't done before. I invited Jerome, Elise, and Vernon to my apartment. Marshall came too. I made Luther's favorite meal, roast chicken with potatoes and a simple salad. I put his photo in the center of the table. It was uncomfortable at first. No one knew exactly what to say. But then Jerome began telling stories from when he was a boy. How Luther took him to the warehouse on Saturdays and taught him to organize inventory. Vernon shared memories of Luther teaching him to drive. I told about our first years when we were so poor we shared a single meal a day but were completely happy. And for the first time in 6 years, we laughed together. We cried together. We remembered together the extraordinary man who loved us all, each in his own way, and who left us different lessons wrapped in complicated love. Dad gave us what we needed, not what we wanted, Vernon said at one point. We wanted money. He gave us consequences, and those consequences saved us from becoming complete monsters. That night, after everyone left, I sat on my balcony with a cup of coffee. The sky was full of stars. I took out Luther's letters that I kept in my special box and read them for the umpteenth time. You did it, my love, I told the stars. Your plan worked better than anyone imagined. You didn't just protect me. You also gave our sons the chance to find their humanity, to become men of whom one day we could be proud. The wind blew softly, moving the leaves of the tree near my balcony. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Complete hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, we could become a family again. Not the family we were before. Something different, something more honest, something built on foundations of forgiveness and second chances instead of blood and obligation. 7 years after Luther's death, on my 71st birthday, my 2 sons appeared at my door together. They brought a small cake, modest flowers, and something more valuable, genuine humility on their faces. "Happy birthday, Mom," they said in unison. I let them in. We ate cake, drank coffee, talked about simple things, and at some point in that ordinary afternoon, I realized something extraordinary. I had truly forgiven. Not with words, but with my heart. The weight I had carried for years had finally lifted. That night, before sleeping, I spoke one last time to Luther's photo. "Thank you," I told him. "Thank you for loving me so much that you planned my protection even after dying. Thank you for giving our sons a last chance to be better. Thank you for 40 years of love that keeps sustaining me even now. I love you, Luther. I will always love you, and one day when my time comes, we will meet again. But for now, I am going to live. I am going to live the life you gave me with gratitude, with peace, with dignity." I turned off the light and fell asleep with a smile on my lips because I finally understood Luther's last lesson. True love isn't just protecting. It is giving the tools to grow, even when that growth hurts. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't what they want, but exactly what they need to become who they are meant to be. And now, looking at my life, my modest apartment, my paintings on the walls, my old cat snoring on the sofa, my sons slowly finding their way back to humanity, I can say with certainty, Luther didn't leave me wealth. He left me something much better. He left me freedom, dignity, and the peace of knowing I was loved with a love so deep it transcended death itself. And what do you think? Was what Luther did cruel, or was it the only way to teach a lesson his sons needed to learn? Would you forgive children who betrayed you like that? Leave me your thoughts in the comments. Empia.